Tycho. The Comedy of the Unwritten Map. Year 92,500,000. Era. Age of Tempests. Author Jeremy Levan and Rise of the Zodiac. Series 2025. Chapter 1. The Starbinder was once a cartographer of destinies until his maps began charting wrong turns, unintended romances, and unusually frequent incidents involving goats. So he quit. Now he lived in a tower built upside down intentionally, he insisted, claiming to be on sabbatical from the tyranny of divine plans. One day, the voice beneath the veil arrived cloaked in silence, trailed by roamers armed with a notebook full of blank pages. "I've come for a map," she said. "You're holding one," he replied. "It's empty." "Exactly." She frowned. He grinned. "Plans are paper in the hands of chaos." And the wind blew her veil sideways in agreement. Chapter 2. They set out to map the unmappable, the shifting land of Varnes, where landmarks changed names and rivers argued about direction. The voice tried to label every hill. Each name vanished. The Starbinder whistled instead. "Why try if it all changes?" She snapped. "See what sticks," he replied. They encountered a cult that worshipped forks, a talking tree with boundary issues, and a merchant who sold nothing but enthusiasm. The voice began to laugh, not because it was funny, because it was freeing. She stopped writing, started sketching, and slowly the pages filled not with facts, but feelings, and the map began to hum. Chapter 3. They returned with a map that made no sense, and that was the point. The Tower of Order demanded coordinates. They handed over metaphors. "I asked for certainty." The warden growled. "You asked the wrong question," said the voice. She pulled off her veil, and chaos gasped. She was not what they feared, just a mirror, for every version of potential not yet claimed. The Starbinder tossed the map into the air. It burst into song. Plans unraveled. People danced, and no one got where they expected. But everyone moved, because self-doubt withers in laughter, and potential blooms in nonsense. Share. Title. The Weightless Crown. Year 92,403,846.15. Era. Age of Tempests. Author Jeremy Levan and Rise of the Zodiac. Series 2025. Chapter 1. The Ghost Walker had once been king, though no one knew it not anymore. He stepped lightly through the realm of Erebin, clubbed in stories, leaving no imprint except the ones people found inside themselves. He came upon the scarred envoy in the middle of a border dispute. The man was shouting, "No one, listen." The Ghost Walker whispered to a bird. The bird landed on the envoy's shoulder. He paused, then breathed. "Who are you?" he asked. "No one," the walker replied. "Then why does everyone suddenly hear me?" The Ghost Walker smiled. "Because you stopped shouting to be heard and started speaking to be understood. Real change happens when you release the grip, not when you tighten it." Chapter 2. They traveled village to village, not to rule, to remind. The Ghost Walker rarely spoke. He let others step forward. Children offered solutions. Farmers debated policy. The scarred envoy, once a mouthpiece, became a listener. And in listening, he learned to lead. One town crowned him in flowers. Another fed him with hands still trembling from war. He didn't make declarations. He asked questions. "What do you need? How can we help?" The Ghost Walker remained behind the curtain of campfires, until one elder asked, "Why do you hide?" "I don't," he said. "I rise when others do." And in that silence, they understood. Chapter 3. When the capital summoned them to answer for their unsanctioned diplomacy, the Ghost Walker vanished. The scarred envoy stood alone, and he stood tall. He did not defend his actions. He shared stories. Of a weaver who saved her village, of a child who taught compromise, a man who led by leaving room. The council sat in stunned stillness, and then voted, not to imprison, to learn. The Ghost Walker watched from a rooftop, unseen, his crown still buried beneath the roots of a tree. Because genuine leadership does not demand followers, it creates leaders. And then, let's go, lightly. Title. The Doorway We Never Saw. Year 92,307,692.31. Era. Age of Tempests. Author Jeremy Levan and Rise of the Zodiac. Series 2025. Chapter 1. The whisper in the womb was no assassin, but the world feared her like one. She moved through cities like breath, unseen, essential, gone before suspicion caught up. She carried no weapon but intuition. In the back corridors of Varnes' quarantine district, she met the one who listened, submitted, once shamed for saving enemies. "Why are you still here?" she asked. "Because someone must stay after the scream," he replied. They shared a silence heavier than most arguments. Then came the call, a sick child abandoned by both factions. The whisper hesitated, then stepped forward. Each moment offers a doorway, but only the awake recognize it. And she was suddenly very awake. Chapter 2. They carried the child through a maze of checkpoints, lies, and memories best left behind. She bribed, he healed. She deceived, he confessed. Together they balanced flint and salve. The child woke, sick, but smiling. It changed her. She noticed every cry behind the walls, every hunger masked in politeness. He taught her names. She taught him exits. Together they moved through the city, helping others no one would touch. The danger grew, but so did the clarity. I thought I was awake, she whispered. You were surviving, he said. Now you're living. And for once, she didn't vanish. She remained. Chapter 3. A bounty was placed on her name. She didn't run. She delivered medicine to the very official who marked her, then sat beside his dying wife. And stay. The one who listened became the one they followed. And the whisper, she became a voice, of warning, of hope, of quiet courage. They built a clinic where boarders once bled. No guards, only chairs. And every time someone asked her why she risked it all, she pointed to a doorway, because it was open. Helping others had not erased her past, but it rewrote her path. In her own hand, awake, title, the roots that remember, year, 92,211,538.46, era, age of tempests, author, Jeremy Levan, Rise of the Zodiac, Series 2025. Chapter 1. The heart of the hollow tree had no heartbeat of her own, only those she carried for others. Born from a wounded forest spirit and a war-torn healer, she breathed grief into song and silence into sanctuary. She wandered until she found the exile's comfort, an abandoned tavern where the rejected came not to forget, but to be remembered gently. There she met the exile's comfort himself, a former prince who left his kingdom not out of shame, but out of empathy. You listen without words, she told him, and you speak without sound, he replied, and in that shared stillness, a bond began to grow, because healing is not a return, it's a resurrection into who you were always becoming. Chapter 2. They opened the doors of the comfort to all, not as innkeepers, as witnesses. An assassin brought her regrets. A merchant shared a story he never told his children, and a boy sang for the first time since his village burned. The hollow tree sang back, not with words, with leaves that turned silver when truths were spoken. The exile offered no advice, only space, and in that space people remembered themselves, whole, hurting, still holy. The comfort became a myth, not because it disappeared, because it reappeared wherever it was needed, carried on shoulders and in hearts. Chapter 3. When the hollow tree's roots cracked the floor, comfort did not collapse. It grew. The exile carved benches into the roofs. Children swung from vines of old sorrow turned soft. The heart sang one final time into the roots, and vanished, not in death, in becoming. Now, whenever someone weeps but no one near, a silver leaf finds them, and the exile's story is told, not of royalty, of return, not to a crown, but to purpose. Because empathy does not erase pain, it waters it, until blossoms bloom from the hurt, and people sit in their own hollow, and no longer feel alone. Title, The Shape of What Remains. Here, 92,115,384.62. Era, Age of Tempests. Author, Jeremy Levan, and Rise of the Zodiac, Series 2025. Chapter 1. The watcher from the morrow could see every future except her own. She stood atop the cracked spire, whispering warnings and lighting beacons others ignored. Then came the Iron Sentinel, a knight who never knelt even to grief. He wore armor not to fight, but to remember who he had failed to save. They met on the day the tower split. Don't touch the edge, she warned. He touched it. It crumbled. They fell into each other's silence, and rose, together. To break is simple, he muttered as they stood in the wreckage. To rebuild is sacred defiance, she replied. They stayed. Chapter 2. They traveled the Rithblins. Each step unveiled new ruins of cities, of trust, of self. She foresaw storms. He built shelters. She named griefs. He listened. They danced once, clumsily, sincerely, in a village where no one had smiled in years. The sentinel removed his helmet. The watcher closed her eyes. For the first time she saw nothing, and it was beautiful. You don't have to see everything, he said. But what if I fail us? Then we fall together. And in that promise, the future bloomed, not predicted. Chosen. Chapter 3. The spire was never rebuilt. Instead, they planted a garden in its place. Every flower named for a mistake. Every path curved through healing. The watcher chose not to see. The sentinel chose not to hide. Together, they taught others to walk broken, not ashamed, but whole. And when asked if their love was fate, they laughed. No, she said, it was forged. Because challenges do not demand perfection. They invite transformation. And when two people meet in their fracture, and do not turn away, they begin. Not again, but finally. Title, The Unbroken Core. Year, 92,019,230.77. Era, Age of Tempests. Author, Jeremy Levan, Rise of the Zodiac Series 2025. Chapter 1. The Shadow Whisperer spoke to fears the way others spoke to friends. She didn't banish them, she asked them questions, made them tea, invited them to be understood. In the bleak citadel of Belthorn, where the exiled champion was forced to guard the very walls that once cast him out, she arrived quietly, her cloak stitched from dreams deferred. He didn't greet her. He didn't speak, but his eyes followed. "You're still guarding a place that told you to leave," she said. "Someone must," he replied. She nodded, then simply sat, and in that silence something long buried stirred. Because to truly belong is to stop abandoning your essence for approval. Chapter 2. She visited every night, asked nothing, said little. Each time the champion stood a bit straighter enough for duty, but for himself. Then came the breach. A monster born from collective shame tore through the gates. The champion fought and faltered, until the whisperer whispered not to him, to the monster. "I see you." It screamed, not in rage, in recognition, and retreated. The champion collapsed beside her. "I was taught to defeat," he gasped, "but not to understand." She placed a hand on his chest. Start there. And the strength he felt was not power. It was peace. Chapter 3. He left the citadel. Not in chains, not in triumph, in truth. He built a garden from discarded weapons. Each bloom bore a name he once forgot. Each path curved toward self. The whisperer remained a companion, not a guide. When others came to understand their pain, they found not lectures, but mirrors and silence that listened. The exiled champion no longer needed approval. He needed only alignment. And when asked how he found himself, he would smile and say, "I stopped leaving me behind, because adversity does not define you. It uncovers." Who never left. Title: The Balance of Hidden Thrones. Year: 91,923,076.92. Era: Age of Tempests. Author: Jeremy Levan. And Rise of the Zodiac Series 2025. Chapter 1. The dream in the teeth of winter walked without footprints. Her presence a rumor even in blizzards. She carried nothing but questions, one sharp enough to cut thrones in half. In the city of Thunderdeep, where inequality was a tradition and silence the currency of power, she found a crypt that led only down. There she met the vow-made flesh, a former oath-keeper turned exile, whose skin bore promises etched into scars. "You breathe louder than kings," she said, and yet none listened, he replied. She offered him a whisper. He offered her a truth, and together they descended past lies beneath comfort. Because your soul is not here for applause, it is here to echo eternity. Chapter 2. They found chambers filled with laws, never enforced, always admired, and voices sealed in mirrors waiting for listeners. The dream shattered them. The vow bound them into lanterns. With each decal released, a secret system unraveled. The rulers panicked. The equality they claimed would cause chaos. What it causes, said the vow, is competition. The dream smiled and turned competition into chorus. Scribes joined rebels. Judges knelt beside janitors. The streets pulsed, not with war, with awakening. Question painted across walls. Who benefits from your silence? And the silence broke. Chapter 3. The dream left before dawn. She always did. The vow remained unscarred now, written in community. The crypt became a council chamber. No throne, only seats, equal. And when people spoke, they echoed, not her name, their own. Because working toward equality does not erase identity. It reveals it in full, in freedom. And when someone asked the vow if justice had finally been served, he replied, "No, it has finally." And heard, and deep beneath the frost, eternity listened back. Title: The Rippled Path. Era: Age of Tempests. Author: Jeremy Levan. And Rise of the Zodiac Series 2025. Chapter 1. The thorn embrace was not a person you hugged unless you wanted splinters of truth embedded in your soul. She wore a jacket made of poor decisions and walked as if every step was an inside joke. One day, she accidentally stumbled into the bone-lashed witness, quite literally by tripping on her own shoelace and crashing into the ceremonial element. "You cracked my bone mask," he said. "Did that? I cracked reality once," she replied, brushing gravel from her elbow. They stared, then chuckled. It wasn't romance, it was resonance, because both had learned. It's not the distance, it's the depth your steps carve. And her footsteps had always been ridiculous, but real. Chapter 2. They didn't set out to change the world. They just tried to return a lost chicken. It led them through a parade, into a town council meeting, and somehow onto the stage of an existential theater piece titled Moo. Along the way, they picked up one disgruntled philosopher, two enchanted tap shoes, and a map that screamed when folded. Every stop, the thorned embrace made people laugh. The bone-lashed witness made them reflect. "Do you plan this?" Someone asked. No, she said. We tripped forward, he added, and the world, confused but curious, followed, because change doesn't always arrive in banners. Sometimes it trips into meaning. Chapter 3. They finally returned the chicken. It had, incidentally, become mayor. The town threw a festival, not to honor them, but honor absurdity. The witness gave a speech about consequence. The embrace fell off the stage, and everyone clapped, not because it was graceful, but because it was true. Years later, villages whispered of the duo who accidentally united regions, not with swords, with stumbles, with laughter, and with listening. The path they carved remains not straight, not clear, but undeniably deep, because even the smallest steps, the echoes, are taken with heart and humor. Idle, the spiral of silent chains. Year, 91,730,769.23. Era, Age of Tempests. Author, Jeremy Levan, and Rise of the Zodiac, Series 2025. Chapter 1. The Whispering Constellation appeared only to those who had been silenced. Her form shimmered in the night sky like a broken lullaby stitched into the stars. In the fortress city of Arrakis, where injustice was legislated in ink and blood, she was summoned not by magic but by memory. There she met the Veil-Piercer, a masked insurgent whose blade only struck at symbols. You want to shatter the system? She asked. I want them to feel small, he replied. But control, she said softly, is not mastery, it's a mirror of fear. And she showed him his reflection, not in a mirror, in the eyes of a child watching the city burn. Chapter 2. They walked together through the underlevel where peacekeepers hoarded food and orphans traded silence for survival. The constellation told stories of past empires that ate themselves in self-defense. The Veil-Piercer listened, then wept. For the first time since the mask, he handed it to a beggar. Why now? She asked. Because fear shaped it, he said. And I'm done mirroring fear. Together, they climbed the citadel, not to destroy, to open the gates, but the gatekeeper refused. So they sang, a lullaby the stars remembered, and the lock forgot. Chapter 3. The laws weren't rewritten, they were burned, not by rage. By refusal, citizens stopped complying, stopped apologizing, started asking loudly. Justice did not arrive with trumpets. It crawled in with torn clothes and honest eyes. The constellation vanished into the stars. The Veil-Piercer planted seeds where swords once clashed. And when asked how the cycle ended, he said, it didn't, it broke. That's different, because cycles of violence are not defeated by control. They are dissolved by courage, the kind that looks inward before lashing outward, and dares to listen, even to silence. Title: The Curriculum of Clocks. Year: 91,634,615.38. Era: Age of Tempests. Author, Jeremy Levan, and Rise of the Zodiac, Series 2025. Chapter 1. The Lion's Whisper was a headmaster of the least prestigious academy in the known world, the school for exceptionally confused youth. Their motto: we teach what we remember. He taught courage by misplacing his own speeches and leadership by letting the students vote on everything, including whether to have a roof. Then came the clockmaker beneath the lake, a legend believed to be real only by conspiracy theorists and imaginative janitors, until he surfaced during a debate about recess. Education, he rumbled, tripping. Is it here no one remembers the oil? They appointed him vice principal, and the school never ticked the same again, because struggle is the forge where your truest name is re-spoken, and no one struggled like those students. Chapter 2. The curriculum changed weekly. 1 week, emotional cartography. Next, debate in mime. Homework included things like forgive someone in algebra or plan the question. When inspectors arrived, they left speaking in metaphors. The Lion's Whisper taught by losing arguments on purpose. The clockmaker rewound time before tests so students learned from failing and tried again without shame. Parents panicked. Children excelled. A student once built a working empathy engine from spoons. Another discovered the square root of sadness. They are not following the rules, muttered the minister. They are making better ones, whispered the janitor. And the school bell chimed in agreement. Chapter 3. The school was burned down, not in flames and funding, but the students rebuilt it with chalk and song, and every graduate carried not a diploma, but a story they helped to write. Years later, those same students led nations, healed wounds, told jokes that dismantled empires, and every one of them said the same thing. I was taught to remember myself. The Lion's Whisper retired to raise bees. The clockmaker returned to the lake satisfied, because true education doesn't polish, it sculpts. It wrestles, it listens, and it remembers that every child is the future, whispered in courage. Title: The Echo That Kindled Tomorrow. Year: 91,538,461.54. Era: Age of Tempests. Author, Jeremy Levan, and Rise of the Zodiac Series 2025. Chapter 1. The old flame-lit galaxies with memory. Hers was a fire that never consumed, only revealed. She once guided fleets. Now she drifted alone in a vessel named Regret, near the edge of Sector Delta Vi. She intercepted a distress beacon. It pulsed not with urgency, but with laughter. She traced it to the laughing ember, an experimental light built to monitor planetary health. Now repurposed as a wandering joy crafter. You sent joy as a distress call? The old flame asked. Yes, said the ember, because you forgot it matters. They hovered above a broken world, and the flame paused, because the path may be so, but every decision leaves its mark on the stars. Chapter 2. They descended to the surface. Once a colony, now abandoned to dust and whispers. The ember repurposed old infrastructure to power biodomes. The flame taught children orphans of war to grow crops by reading starlight. At night, the ember projected forgotten lullabies into the sky, and for the first time in years, people dreamed without fear. What do you gain from this? She asked. A resonance, it replied. Happiness I wasn't coded for, but became. She touched the soil, wept, then stayed, because true happiness isn't found, it's built, one contribution at a time. Chapter 3. When the Galactic Order returned to reclaim the planet, they expected resistance. Instead, they found cooperation, not obedience. Harmony. They left confused, changed. The old flame reignited across the system, not in war, but in warmth. The laughing ember became myth, a ghost of kindness in the circuits. Together they founded a new kind of federation, one where well-being was currency, and laughter, signal of strength, because when you light others, you do not fade, you reflect, and the stars, ever watching, remember who dared to care. Title: The Peace We Held Unseen. Year: 91,442,307.69. Era: Age of Tempests. Author: Jeremy Levan, and Rise of the Zodiac Series 2025. Chapter 1. The crooked kindness dealt in information, bribes, and mercy notes left anonymously in the pocket of her enemies. Her smile could unsettle kings and soothe orphans. She lived in the fractures of Hollowmarsh, a city where lies were considered currency and truth the luxury few afforded. Into this tapestry walked the sacred fool, dressed in rags sewn with proverbs. He spoke only in questions. He laughed when threatened, and when asked his name, he simply said, I answer wrong to find what's right. Together they uncovered a secret document, a peace treaty forged in truth, then hidden for fear it might actually succeed. What we chase at the fool is often less precious than what waits quietly in our hands, and the kindness for once stopped chasing. Chapter 2. They approached the spire of deals, to speak truth, and were nearly killed for it. They fled through catacombs lined with forgotten promises, pursued by enforcers who couldn't admit they agreed. Why not lie to save us? The kindness asked. Because then we wouldn't be us, the fool replied. They found sanctuary beneath the city where children ruled with chalk and games of fairness. There, the fool taught them the peace treaty like a bedtime story, and the children laughed and remembered. They rewrote it in rhyme. When it echoed back up through the tunnels, the spire trembled, not from attack, from truth, unhidden. Chapter 3. The crooked kindness walked openly into the square of eclipsed eyes, read the treaty aloud, then placed it in the fountain, and stepped back. No armies came, no rulers fell, just silence. And then a child sang the rhyme, another joined, and then a guard removed his helmet. Peace arrived, not as decree, as the sihen. The sacred fool disappeared, leaving only a note. Truth is not loud, it's waiting for you. The crooked kindness took no title, only rest, because what she sought had always been near, and what she gave was not revolution, but return to what matters, to what endures, to what waits quietly in our hands. Title: The Boundless Horizon. Year: 91,346,153.85. Era: Age of Tempests. Author: Jeremy Levan, and Rise of the Zodiac Series 2025. Chapter 1. The Saltwalker crossed deserts made of memory and oceans made of refusal. Every step she took stirred legends of defiance and songs of exiles. Her compass was a broken shard from a shipwrecked past. Her goal a land spoken of only by those brave enough to grieve. There she met the echo of a lost realm, once a king, now a rumor. He sang lullabies to ruins, his voice the only bridge left between what was and what must be. You walk toward myth, he said. I walk toward truth, she replied. He listened, then joined her. Because your truth will not be silenced. It is encoded in the rhythm of your rise. Chapter 2. They passed through the windless gate. Beyond it, nations afraid of strangers, walled cities echoing with silence. The Saltwalker knocked on each wall not to demand entry, but to offer story. Some mocked, others wept. One gate opened, then another. The echoes sang. Children followed. Soon, the Saltwalker was not alone. She walked beside refugees of thought and fugitives of freedom. Each bore scars, each carried song, and with every verse shared, the barriers cracked, not from assault, from understanding, because open minds build bridges, and bridges unmake fortresses. Chapter 3. At the edge of the world they found no end. Only a mirror showed them not what they were, but what they could be. Together, the Saltwalker stepped through. The echo remained, becoming the first storyteller of a new realm, one not bounded by maps, but by courage. And when others arrived, uncertain and tired, he would say, "Your journey is your proof, because breaking barriers is not destruction. It is revelation of what was hidden, of who we were, and most of all, of who we are becoming."